at the end.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Ginger something that I'm hoping she can answer about this OSHA mandate, or this federal mandate that OSHA would be enforcing for businesses with 100 employees or more.
Sure.
That's going to the Supreme Court on the 7th. And I guess I'm assuming that the court's probably going to say that the federal mandate is unconstitutional.
I sure hope they are.
Assuming that happens, does that just mean it's getting kicked back to the states and that the state can then do something horrible like that? Or does that mean that it's done for good?
So the federal government only has the capacity to regulate things within its sphere, for instance, in the sphere of commerce. And the reason you wonder, like, what's the magic number 100? Why isn't it 99? Why isn't it 105? It's because there has to be enough of an impact on commerce for the federal government to have any say. So that's why the smaller employers are kind of escaping that liability.
Okay.
The states are independent, autonomous legislative and executive machines themselves. And so we've seen how on the state level, Kathy Hochul was able to push through that health care mandate. And it went up through the state, and the state courts have decision-making on that, and that's why in New York State, we're big losers, because our state courts did not back the Constitution. They backed Kathy Hochul for all of the reasons that Todd stated, in his remarks. But other states, you will see that those mandates have been decimated at the court levels. And again, it should not be, trimming some fat off the Constitution should not depend on where you live, right? It should be for all of us. And I guess that's one of the things I'm very grateful to be in Cattaraugus County. I'm grateful, and I know Mike is too, to represent a very fierce group of patriots that are in our district. We're lucky to have a fairly conservative and fairly intelligent voter base, and it's our privilege to serve. From my perspective, I don't have to serve. I want to serve you. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where this is not my primary way of providing for my family, and I think Angela's points were very well taken. It takes it's a tough stand to take, to put everything that you own, the food you put on your table, your ability to save for your future and your retirement. It takes a special kind of person to give the middle finger to the government and be willing to walk away from all of that. But I think that is what we're going to be facing. We are going to be facing that, and I agree. Well, I'm an optimist, and I think I can understand the peaceful resistance. I'm more in line with Angela, thinking that we are going to have a battle here. When I posted on my Facebook page the other day, making the comparisons between Nazi Germany, and I'm a student of history, I had a religious studies minor in college. Part of that was the Holocaust and looking at German history. And when you line up the things that are happening today, the slow eating away of our privileges, of our licenses, of our ability to interact with each other, our ability to think, to oppose, to voice dissent, all of that was part of that 5-year period where that entire populace was conditioned by a totalitarian government to march in the same direction. Does that mean that all Germans believed that they should be doing those things? No, they just lost the will to dissent. And one thing I really have a lot of respect for you, Angela, for what you're going through. It must be incredibly hard. But the thing I have the most respect for is not the fact that you walk away from your job, or that you're willing to be that beacon, with the state coming after you. It's the fact that you're willing to voice your dissent in a world that is increasingly hostile to this viewpoint. But it's amazing. The more that we talk to each other, we find out there's more people that think like we do that don't think like we do. They're just afraid.
Yes.
And we have got to break the illusion of consensus. We have got to go out there and let people know what we think, and to say what we think. And in some ways, I feel very privileged, not relying on my legislative paycheck, to actually voice how I feel about things in the way that I think my constituency feels about things. We are facing, though, an incredibly vindictive government. And I'm part of government. I'm small government with a little g, right? But the other government is very vindictive. So Todd might have mentioned, I know you mentioned, that we brought a lawsuit, meaning when we passed our constitutional county resolution, and Mike and I worked really, really hard on that to get a consensus, and it was unanimous passage in our legislative chambers. When we worked on that, we kind of knew that some of these things were coming down the pike, and we wanted to fortify ourselves so that if mandates came, we'd be in a position to fight them. So we get the mandate for our healthcare workers. As you all know, we run 2 county nursing homes. We need workers to be able to carry out the good work there and take care of our residents, and of course, under state regulations, which are increasingly tougher to care for people. So we decided we were going to fight that. And when the mandate came down and we were looking at losing, a good 20-some-odd% of our healthcare workers, and we can't afford to lose a single one, we brought the lawsuit. Very shortly thereafter, guess who appeared in our nursing homes to take photocopies of every religious exemption filed by every worker who was opposing the vaccine mandate? The Department of Health. You tell me that was not a coordinated thing. We bring a lawsuit and that happens, there's something really...
They'll step up the game.
Oh, I'm certain of it. So the next thing that's coming down the pike is this $1 million, it's this bribe money that's being offered by the state government to county legislatures, particularly since 32 out of 61 of us said, no, we're not going to be enforcing your mask mandate. We don't think it's effective, and it's very difficult to enforce. And by the way, it's another unfunded mandate being handed down on small government from the large government who's not providing any resources for it. Well, now she says, well, here's the $1 million. We want you to go out and hire people. Not to mention you can't find anyone to do that. But the $1 million is supposed to be used to enforce that mandate. And we're going to be put in a situation next week where we're going to be facing, do we take the money or not, right? And it sounds probably pretty easy to everyone sitting here that, oh no, we just say no to the money. We have been told, or we believe, that when we say no to the money, there will be retribution for that. And so
it's like they're holding us all hostage.
And we are hostage. We are hostage to funding. The government takes money out of our pockets as taxpayers and then hands it back to us in the form of, these Medicaid this and, when we first became legislators, our county administrator, who's amazing with understanding how money works, brought out $1. Do you remember this? He showed us the dollar and he said, 69 cents of this dollar, this represents a tax dollar, what we as the legislature are going to be spending on your services here in the county. 69 cents of it goes to fund unfunded mandates by powers that are above us. So when they pass crazy legislation letting criminals out on the street and having to provide lots of evidence in support of their innocence, right, through body cameras and that kind of thing, we had to hire more sheriffs to do all of that stuff that's in that statute. It just didn't come for free. So that is the biggest problem, I think, is one of the funding issues. And I think it's very difficult for county. I can tell you we are 100% in your corner. I don't think there's a single legislator who wants to enforce a mask mandate. I certainly don't think there's a single legislature, regardless of whether they have chosen for themselves to be vaccinated, feel that imposing vaccines on the populace is in any way an appropriate or legal thing to do. But we're going to be making, I think, some pretty hard decisions as we're facing funding. Like, do we shut down our county nursing homes when we don't get the funding because the governor punishes us? Well, what does that do to all of you folks who have your loved ones in those nursing homes who now get shipped to Long Island and you can't see them anymore? And that's just one example of a program. I mean, you would not believe what the county does.
Basically, so you can set up sites so that neighbors and other people can tell on other businesses and like call centers?
So you're talking about the please report the violators? Mandate or call, well and again, if we go back to Nazi Germany, what was the thing? That was exactly what everyone was asked to do. They rewarded children who would come into school and report whether or not their parents were, resisting the regime. So that's the kind of thing we're facing.
Well, I'm not even sure that there's a clue as to what the money is for.
Right. Yeah, because we're not getting a lot of instructions. There's just been a lot of
Yeah, but if you read and follow her, on December 3rd, she said there's no way to enforce a mask mandate. I'm not going to do one. December 13th, she does one. Then she walks it back, and then she, and it's like.
And she makes announcements before following it up in writing, and of course you want to be able to see it.
It's very rarely followed up in writing, which is why
So you have to check.
The mandate's not even in
handwriting.
No, the
Correct.
mandate is not real.
Yeah.
The mandate is not an executive order. I have read the mandate. The mandate, this was coming, and I'll tell you, she knew it was coming. She knew it was coming on November 24th. And how do I know that? Because the regulations for the Department of Health giving broad sweeping emergency powers to the Department of Health under a 90-day period to enact emergency regulations on masking and vaccinations went into place on 11/24. That is where you will find the mandate. The mandate is not an executive order from the governor. The governor came from her mouth, but she then had to go through, you know, the administrative portion of the DOH.
But if you remember, she did that because, to their credit, the Democratically dominated state legislature withdrew
The power.
emergency powers from the governor as a result, you know, that they initially had granted to the governor at the beginning of the COVID
So we can
pandemic.
look forward to her then creating a new emergency where she can give herself new emergency powers, so
She can't give them to herself, they would have to grant them back to her. They had already withdrew them. It could happen, I don't know what they might do. I don't
She's
have any-
declared a state of emergency, but it doesn't come with the same powers. Essentially, during the, quote, early part of the pandemic, our
Yeah.
legislature did a horrible thing. They just ceded all power to the executive branch, and that we're supposed to have a tripartite, you know, power of government. Legislative, you know, judicial, executive, all serving an important function and all having a checks and balance on each other. We lost a very valuable one, and George Borrello and the Republican people in those branches were really the only ones who were speaking up for that loss that I could see. It was a terrible disservice.
Just so everyone knows too, like our county legislation here, they don't have a say on what's happening come January 5th when legislation recess is over and they come back to vote on these bills. Because I'd asked that
Oh, in the
question
state?
earlier.
Yeah. We have no.
They have no say on any
We're
of that.
we're under the state, just like,
Yeah.
you know, we're down here.
But they have our back, like we said, they're in our corner, they're fighting for us, so we have to do whatever they need from us to make their job easier to help us. So, and like she said too, sometimes you have to take one for the team, it sucks, and you might not understand, but back to what Brenda's trying to say, don't get angry. Try and be understanding, you know, dig a little deeper before you start to get mad and send nasty emails, because they get them all day. So,
What is there any way to work with the 32 other county legislators or counties, because I know sometimes there's boards of supervisors, where none of them take the $1 million? Is there any way to
This is
accomplish
another,
that?
it's an excellent question, and this is another problem. Think about what has been happening here and the time frame under what is it any surprise to you that the mask mandate was announced on a Friday?
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock, where it's supposed to go into effect on Monday at 8 a.m., and all of the county legislatures across the state are out of session, and we, in order to do something, are required to all be together and get, you know, a majority vote. There was no, that was done for a reason, and so we're under a real significant, you know, time pressure. How is it that we've never really tried to establish those connections with other counties? We never had a need to, so how do we do that so quickly?
now do you think we're gonna be punished in some way come January when everything comes back because we told her no?
No.
I mean, no? Okay, because,
I
I
hope
mean,
not.
I'm just waiting for her to punish us like children, so it's,
Like Ginger referenced the nursing home, I mean, you know, closing the nursing home, I don't see any option there, and I'm probably being a little bit optimistic, but there is, you know, we operate 2 nursing homes, the Pines and Olean and the Pines and Machias. There is no other places for these folks to go.
no, they'd have to leave state.
It's
You
a
know,
zero-sum
and
game for the
It's a
state.
zero-sum game, and I mean, we filed a lawsuit, you know, in the state court system to fight the vaccine mandate specifically targeted healthcare employees, you know, healthcare workers. We lost that battle. Ultimately, we didn't end up losing as many staff as we anticipated that we would lose, which was a good thing because, I mean, in addition to the staff and the employees that we are looking out for, we also look out for the folks that live there
Absolutely.
and their families, which Machias being right in our backyard, I mean, I'm sure that
You know someone
everybody in
who
this
has
room who
someone
has
there?
somebody who's there or been there, or an employee who has worked there, or, you know, and these are all good people. There's there's nowhere for these folks to
If
go.
public health was the goal, those nurses would have been allowed
Yeah.
to show
It's about
that.
votes.
That
There
is
is-
how we know.
If public health were the issue here, we lost 800,000, if we believe the statistic, 800,000 people in the last 2-year period to COVID, right? If we believe that number, not people dying with COVID, but allegedly people dying of COVID. How many people have we lost? And I'm not, calling out cigarette smokers at all, but just to kind of draw the line here, how many people have we lost to cigarette smoking related illnesses in the same 2-year period? 960,000 people. If public health were the issue and death and dying, it'd be a different conversation. This is about something completely different, and I'm of the mind it is about, think about masks. Masks take away our individuality. Masks make it more difficult for us to communicate with each other, right?
Right.
Think about children that don't know anything else. They're entering the school system and that's all
And it's
they
all
know.
about conformity and compliance.
Firemen,
Yep.
we wouldn't have the masks either. I walked to get my lunch today. I walked by an elementary school. 26 masks I counted on the ground. Those kids that want to wear them,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know?
They're wearing them in
It's
the
very
car
troublesome.
driving down the road with their parents.
yeah.
There are
I'm
people,
kind of afraid.
I watched people over the summer on their lawnmowers in the county of Erie with a mask on. I'm like, what are you
What
doing?
people don't understand is there have been 2 studies done on mask wearing in the world, pretty much. And there is 0 scientific data that shows
support.
masks are effective. The cloth masks are useless.
It's to make you look
Yes.
like you're doing
So none of
something.
this is, they're saying follow the science, the masks work. There's no data to back that up.
And isn't it ironic that the first population that was attacked for a mandated vaccine was the same population that we sent out into the trenches without appropriate PPE for all of 2020? And so as a result of sending them out into the trenches without appropriate PPE, almost all of them
Are
developed
naturally
COVID
immune.
and are naturally immune, yet we're the first population that we stick them. I'm having a hard time with that one.
The masks matches my outfit.
The mask. Yeah.
It's all part of the plan. Build people up just to tear them down. It's part of the
Absolutely.
plan.
I have just one more question too. We see what's happening in New York City, okay? Like, they're being
Can't go into a
policed
restaurant.
hardcore. Now, does our governor have the power, or is it gonna come down to our legislation and our senators for Cattaraugus County if that type of lifestyle is going to be implemented in Cattaraugus County? I mean, she wants to make this, it's abundantly clear, she wants to make this statewide.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of states that already have. I mean, the governor in Massachusetts came out and she said, you're not allowed to go anywhere unless you're, vaccinated. So are we facing that here in even small counties of New York, or can we fight it? Do you guys have a say?
That's a really, really complicated
Yeah.
question. And let me just give you just a small example. Restaurants. In New York City, you can't go into a restaurant unless you can show positive proof. Obviously, the stripping of a privilege. It's not a right to go to a restaurant, it's a privilege, but it's a stripping of a privilege. Who has control over residents? Not the county government, restaurants, not us. It's a person who owns it, but what is it? They have a license. They get a license to serve liquor. It's a state licensing. So under the state liquor authority, they can come into any restaurant at any time, no due process whatsoever, take that liquor license off the wall and walk out with it. And the restaurant owner spends the next 10 months and $50,000 hiring someone like myself or another lawyer to fight for that license back. So that's what we're facing here. In the county, we don't have any say over whether or not they have a liquor license and can be open or the like. What we can do is say we will not send our people, our county workers, into businesses to harass them. And that's what we're trying to do, is hold the line there.
I mean, because there's already, like, even beyond that, like Bills games, Sabres games, you can't go anywhere without your vaccine pass. So it's already happening to some level here on our
And
side of the
every-
state.
and
Bill
every-
Stadium is a county-owned stadium,
Okay.
so they have that authority.
Okay.
The Sabres, a
Yeah.
private entity. I mean, I guess, I'll just throw this out here, in my opinion. I mean, Ginger's absolutely correct. The biggest fear, I think, for many is small businesses, particularly bars and restaurants, because the state liquor authority
Yeah.
operates.
Yeah.
I mean, so far, I mean, I to be honest with you, I'm more of a kind of keep quiet and avoid the
We're a
spotlight.
good balance for each other.
Because the last thing I think that small businesses, particularly bars and restaurants, want to do is draw attention to themselves.
Absolutely.
They want to be a
Because they
lightning
will
rod.
be visited. So if they don't draw attention to themselves, I mean, so far, we have not seen the state police dispatched out
any
here,
place here.
which she has the authority to do.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it
I think the best part too about
anywhere.
where we live and
So I'm
being
not
so
sure how
rural.
serious she really is about enforcing
Yeah.
the mandate,
But a
because
lot
I
of our
think.
state police out here are pretty much, they understand, they've been pretty good.
But you don't understand, they won't come from out here. If you ever
Yeah,
drive,
true.
if you ever drive through Limestone, if you ever drive through Limestone and you're going over the speed limit, those state police, those troopers are not local Zone A troopers. They are they are dispatched from special traffic enforcement bureaus, special
Across the state.
divisions all across the state. They're not local folks. They won't be local folks.
That's so
It just
scary.
won't be that way. And so far, we have not seen it. So, I mean, I tend to,
But we're also being very smart about not being as
Yeah.
vocal about it,
not being
Are
as
those-
vocal about it. And,
just kind of going
Are they
about our
really
business.
state troopers or are they just revenue officers?
well, I agree with you in some ways, yes. I agree with you in some ways.
Okay, what's your question, honey?
So what do we do if it's the next election or where we can put something, some kind of a bill that we can vote on saying we are not in favor of these items that are taking place, these rules that are being provided upon those of us in New York State? How do we get that something we can vote on in the next election?
So it depends on which election you're talking about. I think if you're talking about local elections, we're already in your corner. You don't need
All
to
right,
be,
then state.
it's really about the state, and frankly,
So how do
it's,
we get that on the next state?
it's about electing representatives that
Yeah.
represent your interests, and the biggest
Yeah.
problem,
Just like
if
Todd
if
said.
every Republican and every conservative and every independent and everyone who thinks like we do actually got out and voted, on election day, we'd have a much better chance of having a government in New York State that is for the people. But everyone stays
We don't.
home because they don't think that their vote matters.
Well, we
That
gotta
is
do
what we
it.
need to do.
They have to, and
We
people
can
need to
talk
start
about it
standing
all we
up.
want.
Correct.
But we gotta get up and do it.
Yeah.
Well, if you remember back, the year escapes me exactly. What year was the SAFE Act?
2013.
14?
13.
13, 14? I mean, that started a ton of conversation in the state of New York among, pro-Second Amendment folks that respected the Second Amendment. But we still didn't see any greater turnout. And we heard
No
that
change.
we heard that exact phrase every single election since that year, since the SAFE Act was adopted and passed into law. We haven't seen a change. We have not seen the number of voters.
Lucky if you get half.
The turnout has not increased. It stayed the same.
People like to complain, but they don't show
So
up.
they complain,
So how do we
and
test
if you
it?
look at the turnout upstate among people that were, anti-SAFE Act, I mean, we had counties up, all of the counties up here are incredibly anti-SAFE Act. It's a similar scenario. The voter turnout did not increase. It stayed about the same. So we can sit here and we can talk and we can
Yes.
complain and we
We
can
need to
do all
act.
of these things. But the bottom line is that I'll bet you that where you live, you've got,
Five
if you
neighbors.
live here, there's 5 houses that are around you, directly adjacent to you, that have registered voters in them. And on any given election, at least half of them don't bother to vote.
So what are the options? Do I move to Tennessee?
No, the options are get
You
those
get
people
their
off
asses
their
off their park lounger to the electoral booth.